Welcome to another episode of Baoism Unveiled. This is the podcast that explores the tapestry of human spirituality and the wisdom found in all faiths and all spiritual beliefs. I'm your host, C.D. Demiscio, and today we have one of my favorite people joining us on this exploration, Robbie Pollock. But before we start, let me just explain a little bit of the basics. So a Baoji is a spiritual teacher, someone that you learn from. It could be your third grade teacher, a parent, a favorite uncle, a person you meet on the street. It could actually be a religious figure like Jesus or the goddess Kali. These are ones that have come up in the past. And then we have the concepts of rocks and talks. Rocks are things that help you along your spiritual path, practices that you can do on a daily basis or in the world that help you to progress further and feel better and be happy. And then talks are just the opposite of that. These are things that maybe hold you back from your spiritual development as a human being. That's something I always like to explain before we start. But Robbie, how are you?
I'm so good today. I'm so grateful. I'm so happy to be talking to you, CD, honestly.
Dude, I'm always happy to be talking to you. So can you share a little bit about your background in terms of spirituality and where you're coming from so people could maybe have an idea of a baseline?
Sure. I grew up in New York City and in a small little church in Harlem that used to be Pentecostal but became non-denominational. My entire family was involved in this church. It was a Christian-esque situation with very insular views. It was only later in life, after I left at age 18, that I realized it was more like a cult than like a church. My family are still there, and I kind of forwent all religious viewpoints. And that extended to my own spirituality as well, basically cutting myself off from all of those things. So that's kind of like the majority of my life has been spent running away from what I saw as being an unhealthy way of life and living, and disdain for spirituality in myself and others. I don't think I'm still there.
I can really relate with what you're saying, actually. I can. And I think maybe that's a step in the progression that we have. But where are you at now?
Now I think, it's wildly different. I find myself seeking out people with strong, grounded spiritual practices and wisdom. I find myself open to feelings that I associate with spirituality, feelings of awe and gratitude and connectedness. I tend to refrain. This is really funny if you compare our styles of spirituality. I absolutely try at all costs to refrain from naming these kind of ineffable sensations as much as possible, because I feel like words are tricky around spirituality. We're often describing the same thing with different terms and then fighting over the terms. So I think I'm trying to receive and give as much as possible there. I tell people all the time now, I'm sending you blessings. I'm sending you positive vibes. I use this generic kind of language, and to me, it has a spiritual connotation. It means I'm using my calories to think about them and wish them well and would be there for them if I could be. Yeah, I think it feels woo-woo to me, so far from my agnostic kind of bent, but I feel it very deeply.
Well, I love that. You said using your calories to send good vibes, essentially. That's such an awesome description. Okay, so here's the question. I think I may already know the answer to this, but when people ask what religion or what's your belief system, do you have an answer that you give?
I give a murky answer, and I'm sorry for all the listeners of your awesome podcast. I think my answer is usually something like, I respect all people of faith, and I practice being good, doing good things.
I don't think there's anything to apologize for there. I mean, this may surprise you, but I've been really excited to talk to you because from my point of view, you're one of the most spiritual people that I know. And the fact that you give this murky answer doesn't change that. I mean, in fact, I would say that's a very Baoist point of view. You know, without using the label of Baoism, I would say that's a very Baoist thing to say.
I would agree. From what I've seen of Baoism, I'm like, yeah, I dig it. That matches my energy. There isn't a lot to disagree with. which might be the heart of my thing, is like reducing disagreement is a big deal.
I feel that it is a big deal. Reducing disagreement. That's where a lot of my own stumbling blocks came with just about every organized religion or organized spiritual philosophy that I took part in, and there's a lot of them, was the things that I disagreed with were sometimes just so blatant. I had to toss out the baby with the bathwater.
I was thinking about times when I practiced Buddhism, which has given me a lot of gems, and I hit a snag in one of the many million flavors of Buddhism in the practice or terminology, where I was like, I just don't get with that, and I also bailed. I was like, if I'm not meditating like this every day, then I'm not doing it right, so I should just stop. And it feels good to not be there, where I can kind of carve my own path, do what works, not be hung up on being right, I think.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are like us. And when you take a cookie cutter thing and place it in front of somebody that likes to make their own cookies, maybe the cookie's delicious, but maybe the cookie just doesn't work.
That was
The cool,
actually a really great metaphor. A
see,
tasty one, I might add.
this is why I love talking to you because I get affirmation and jokes both.
And bad puns, yes.
Okay, so let's talk about your Baoji, the teacher figures that you've had, who you've learned part of your personal philosophy from. Do you have some Baoji that stand out among the many that I'm sure exist?
I do. I think some of them would be surprised to hear that they are. I spent time in prison, and there was a guy, we all called him Pena, and Pena used to run laps in the yard, just religiously. I didn't realize it was religious until one day I spoke to him and he said, "You should come to Buddhist services," which was kind of a treat. It was a quiet room, and we practiced a form of Zen Buddhism where we sat. And I remember being there as like a early 30-year-old, supposed to be meditating, but instead I'm opening one eye and peeking at Pena to see how is his meditation going.
I can relate.
But Pena had a scar on his face and had lived one of those lives where you're like, holy crap, like how are you even still alive? By the time I met him, he was like a walking wave of peace. Like wars would stop
Wow.
when Pena passed through. Now he's home and he's a advocate for social change and very powerful out here with that same kind of calm. And I think something about that energy, the ability to diffuse horrible violence, horrible just outcomes, and present that like it came from in him, and that was something I really, really wanted to emulate. Um, I, I understand now that it was grounded in the practice. It wasn't some magical aspect to his character. It's he synthesized his own ups and downs and turned it into something that's just a gift to the world.
God, that's such a powerful story, dude. I want to meet this guy.
Oh, Penny's awesome. Penny's awesome. Yeah, he's a really cool dude.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Um,
so kind of was a Baoji to you at a time it sounds like you really needed one. He showed up and brought you somewhere where you got some benefits, I'm guessing.
yeah, I've never really told him that, but I used to copy him running as well. So I'd be like, "Can I run with you?" And it was hard to keep up, which is kind of another metaphor, I guess, a physical one.
It's funny. So when I haven't seen Pena, but when you're describing him, I'm picturing. I'm sure you'll know who I'm talking about. I'm picturing Debo.
There's a lot of similarity. He's kind of he's Dominican, and he has like a olive brown complexion. Everybody finds him handsome. I had one of my interns fall in love with him because he did an event with us. He's like, "Who is that?" I was like, "You cannot sully Pena. Don't stop, stop." But yeah, I
Oh,
think
that's
I think
funny.
too. There's the thing about inner light that that is also related to attractiveness and like magnetism or whatever, and it's also why it's so easy for spiritual leaders to abuse their power is because of that. It's almost like you need an extra layer of caution when dealing with people when you have that much, whatever that is, charisma, riz, as, as they're
Yeah.
saying.
So we've got Pina, and it sounded like maybe there were some others that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a recent person who started a Zoom-based men's group called the Better Men Project.
Oh, I'm
And
familiar.
this is before COVID. People weren't really meeting on Zoom like that. And I was like, I could really use some of that energy. I got in the Zoom and he started us with a grounding meditation. And I was like, oh, this is a good, like the words he was using made sense to me. And I was like, okay, I didn't expect this. I thought we were just going to be dudes talking about, how to not be a dick, which is kind of like a big thing that I'm on, right? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
that.
You actually
Um,
wrote a book about
I
that.
read, yeah, I know. I thought that's all it was going to be, but instead he kept talking about this thing called the we space, which is like the concept of the space in between us, the space that we create um, as we interact and listen to each other and hold space with each other. He talked about things like thinking about, 7 generations in the future, the things that we do now and how it impact the changes and the trials and the tribulations of the world. And I was like, that is how I want to be thinking. And we get so hyper focused on the present, how I'm going to make money now, how I'm going to hustle now, and like the framing of thinking of my ancestors who I honestly avoid thinking about most of the time, and thinking about my descendants or the world in the future. Those are things I also don't like thinking about too much. It's so much easier to focus on the hustle and the grind. And so I found that really rewarding. Then, after 3 years of doing this online activity every month, I got to participate in a retreat and a ceremony with him and a group, and it was one of the most profound. I'm getting teary thinking about it. I thought I had been kind of disconnected from that depth of feeling, which I realized also is a big part of being human, having a connection to that feeling, an awe so deep it hurts, gratefulness that it makes you want to cry, the bittersweet tang of like full, full, full existence. And I was able to get multiple glimpses at that ability in myself. And so his name is Gibran Rivera. He offers workshops and coaching and does all kinds of cool, positive stuff in the world for a lot of people. And he is definitely a Bao G. Although I also haven't told him. I think he knows this. His problem is that he always has to constantly like remind himself of like whatever, which is also very human and beautiful for a teacher to acknowledge out loud.
Yeah. So he's like acknowledging his own, like, I don't know quite what the word would be, but like imposter syndrome or
Desire for more humility. Yeah. Yeah.
wow. So okay, so these are two amazing Baoji, Robbie, and I want to ask you more, but I try to keep these to a little under 30 minutes. So let's move on, and maybe we can have you on again sometime. I'll just throw that out there. In terms of talking about rocks, positive things that people can do in their daily lives that might bring them closer to, some sort of spiritual fulfillment or happiness, dare I say. What are some rocks that you've discovered in your life that you could share with other people?
If connection is a thing, it's really hard to feel spiritual in total isolation. Even for people who go on, like, you climb up the mountain, there's that old, Nietzschean dilemma between being all spiritual on the mountaintop and all like earthly in the village, right? And so there's like, how do I walk a middle path in a world that is increasingly isolated? And so, anyway, one of the practices I do is I comment very frequently on things my friends are doing and tell them as honestly and plainly as I can, with zero sarcasm or cynicism, just how awesome they are for what they're doing. It's something I do pretty much every day. I send someone a blessing of some kind. Keep going, rock on, just like it doesn't take a lot of time. I can't do it for everyone I know remotely, but I try to do it for someone or multiple people every day.
I can
And I
say
feel, yeah,
as someone who's been a recipient of that, it makes a huge difference. It means so much, dude. Like I can recall a couple of times that you like threw out some like love appreciations to me for just things that I'm doing, and it makes such a difference. It really does. I love this. Thank you so much for that, by the way. For not only for, sharing that with me, but also for sharing this with the world as a rocks that they can participate and do.
I'm so grateful to be able to say that out loud too. I don't think of it really as a practice, but now that in this framing, it feels that way. And then I guess the same thing, I'm working really hard at taking time for myself as well. I started this boost practice. It's being facilitated by Gibran, and we agree to wake up at 6 a.m. every day. We agree to do 15 minutes of meditation, minutes of exercise, yada, yada, yada. Do a conscious eating practice, do an hour of creative time every day. And all of those things definitely assist with, they're all like kind of mini rocks in themselves.
Yeah.
But we're doing it in a team. So I'm accountable to the team, which is, I've already
Important,
lost my
dude.
team points, CD. I've lost my team points. I, oh my God. So there's this thing. Um,
You're killing me. You've lost your team points.
I
Okay, go
lost
ahead.
my team points. I did.
Okay.
Here's the rock. This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying, CD. And this is the magic. This is the real magic. After you've screwed up, after you've screwed up, there are two choices. You can flee or you can try to repair. Flee is like all kinds of things. Deny, prevaricate, like ignore, avoid. And then there's this other thing. And this other thing hurts a little. It's the pain of branching and growth. It's an introspection. It's, you can almost even get addicted to this pain of when you acknowledge that you screwed up. It doesn't feel great, and yet you move on. You build on that. That is a practice. It's linked to like accountability. If we look around, we can see that this is in sore dearth in the world today. Like people, it's like a death sentence to admit that you're wrong and really mean it and feel the sorrow of having fucked up. Am I allowed to say that on this podcast? And feel the
You
sorrow
can
of
say
having fucked
whatever
up,
you want.
but like still try to move forward and do your, literally just keep doing your best. And it burns like working out, like a muscle, like it, to really feel that. And especially you will let people down. Even when you try your best, you're gonna let people down. But the practice is to literally step into it and face it and try your best to repair as best as you can. It's hard.
It's at the same time, I mean, exactly what you're saying is such a profound and strong spiritual practice. I mean, you don't learn from a mistake unless you can acknowledge that you made a mistake. That's just the bottom line of the whole thing, right?
Yeah, and there's a really fine distinction. I know a lot of people who are flippant, like the shoulder shrug. Oh yeah, I screwed up. Oh yeah, okay, whatever. There's a difference between that or I'm sorry, you should absolutely forgive me. There's like it's not even a subtle distinction, I don't think. I think it's a very clear distinction between like feel is you go through a little bit of grief, a little mini dosage of grief, and that is, it's just really important, I think, to be able to achieve the kind of growth that moves you beyond that and allows you room to see when other people fail. If you've gone through that grief process and you're always actively going through that, when somebody else screws up around you, you're like, oh, I've got plenty of room for that because like I give that room to myself. You hold fewer grudges. You're constantly repairing relationships when the other person's screwed up, right? It's a yeah. I do think it's deeply profound and easy to do fraudulently. I feel a bit weird belaboring this point because it is. I think it's odd, but
Belabor away, my
personally,
friend.
it's been
Do it.
rewarding. Yeah,
So easy to do fraudulently is I think a very important nuance to this.
right. I'm personally turned off heavily by the apology that turns something into your fault, where someone like is like, "I'm sorry," right? You're like, "Oh,
Like, oh, I'm
okay,
sorry you're such
it,
a bad person.
yeah, I'm sorry. You're actually concerned with things." It's like, oh, okay.
Okay,
I don't
so
know if
moving,
there's probably more rocks, but
I'm sure that there's
playing
more
music.
rocks. I've actually I can think of a bunch of rocks that I've learned from you or heard from you or seen from you. But again, let's move on and we're going to talk about talks. What are some things that you've discovered in your life that are impediments to spiritual growth? Talks.
Hmm. I got a whole like dresser full of these. Let's
Pull some of
see.
them out, man. Open up those drawers and dump them.
So we talked about lying, and I lying is literally the antithesis of it's just giant talks, just maybe one of the biggest. And so I have discovered recently that I am a horribly codependent person. I am constantly trying to manage the emotions of everyone around me. I'm trying to anticipate and be the nice guy and like say the right thing. And I also, this is related, I guess, to the thing that I was talking about earlier. I want to hide all of my mistakes. I want to not, I want to be the infallible person. So if there is a possibility that I could get away with something and not admit it, I still uh, just always have to eh, recognize the urge to manage and control someone else's experience and decision making by limiting their information or lying to them. That is a giant tox. It says that I trust the world that little that I want to try to control all outcomes. And so I think when you commit to honesty, um, it can help avoid that tox.
That's super profound, dude. So I'm taken to a couple of potential examples of that, and I think a caution is also worthy of throwing out. Like I have a 12-year-old daughter. I always tell her to be honest. Right, I tell her that it's better to tell the truth. If you tell a lie, you're gonna have to cover the lie, and it leads to more lies. But there are times I think that you do more harm to yourself and to others by giving too much information. Do you know what I mean by that?
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah, like don't put yourself
I
in a
totally agree.
situation if you make a mistake and if you a piece of paper flies out your window while you're driving, don't go to the police station and say I littered. Right? That's,
Absolutely.
but
Uh,
maybe go pick up the garbage that you lost or some other garbage to make up for it. That might be the way to go. I wanted to throw that caution out there. Like complete honesty within yourself is good, but we do live in a society where there are times that complete honesty can hurt yourself and other people in ways that you may not consider.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. I mean, I think that's the magic maybe behind all like truisms or like even like an oversimplification or like a reductive approach to these things is I like how you said honesty inside yourself. One of the things is that the focus with that talks is your lying impacts you. We talked about calories in the beginning. It's like you the advice you gave your young child is like it's not just that you'll have to keep lying, it's that you'll have to keep thinking about it. When you walk
Right.
in the room, you're worried about what everybody else is thinking. And that is, again, you could be engaging, you could be present, you could be listening, you could be enjoying life. But instead, you're worried about the layers of deception. That is an awful way to live. And so many people are living it. I'm in so many circles, CD, and I walk in the room and all I can feel is the weight of everybody's like little plastic smiles and their little it's and I feel the deepest sadness and like compassion for them. And I just want to create room to allow them to be as open and honest. That's the other thing, perhaps, is if you can, with your honesty, you create room for other people to be open and honest as well, and that enriches people's lives, builds connection.
Man, it's such an important talks. All the caveats aside, it's so important. And everything that you've just said, I just want people to listen to that and maybe go back and listen to it again because that last part that you said, with your honesty, you create the room for other people to be honest. And it's just like with the men's groups and with other, communities that you may belong to. When you are in a group like that and you open up, it creates the room for someone else to open up, and that's where the magic happens, in my opinion, in community and in humanity.
I've witnessed it a million times. I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it. The amount of powerful, life giving breakthroughs, people who could be utterly toxic and have transmuted that through honesty into something generative and glorious.
So, do you have another talks that you'd like to share with people listening?
I think recently a friend of mine who I follow, they go by Janice on multiple social media. They're a photographer based in Iran, and I collect all of Janice's stuff. I just really like her vision. But she was saying, she shared with me that she is now a couple months sober and recently gave a talk with a group about addiction. I haven't drunk alcohol in like 15 years. And I was telling her that someone told me, this is getting convoluted, but the phrase that someone told me is that addiction is just the failure to recognize that everything is alive.
Wow.
And the person who told me that went on, they were like, the computer in front of you is alive. The ground you're on, the everything is alive, and you are in relationship to it. And I was like, oh, you're blowing my mind. I realized that the tox of addiction, which is, often a coping mechanism, it says, I will use this thing as a thing, whether it's sex, whether it's drugs, whether it's like I want to be the best at business or in this competitive arena, whatever the addiction is, it's saying that everything connected to that, I'm not really in relationship to it, that I can use and abuse this thing and it has no repercussions on me, on the world, on anything else. And I don't care where it came from. I don't care where it's going. And that talks of being able to take myself out of relationship of it to everything that is the root of a lot of harm. A lot of harm. And I know oh man. I liked that framing, and so I'm mulling it over. It's not refined, but shout out to everybody who's changing their relationship to things, whatever they are.
Super cool. You have given me so much to think about. This is one of the reasons I love talking to you. It's always these conversations. I end up going like, but wait, I want to go this direction. I want to go this direction, but I'm going to hold myself together. So there's a question that Quanta asked that was really good. And she was like, maybe you could share this with other guests. And her question was, what do you think a universal or a world religion that everybody took part in would, or spirituality or faith, practice, however you like, what do you think that would look like? What would be some components of that, do you think, Robbie?
There'd be one main component, and it's
Which
two parts. It would be sound and movement.
Sound and movement.
Sound and movement. Yeah. My own personal mantra is about sound and movement. And it's the thing that I found transcends all like linguistic barriers. I can hear a riff from any culture, any language, any time meter. I can hear a melody from any culture and get shivers. It activates my awe, from Gregorian chants to Hungarian folk melody. And movement is utterly true. Like it is exactly right there. And so when we open our voices and we move, we're tapping into everything that is. And I think it's a fundamental element to any global universal religion. The spheres are moving, we're hurtling through space. The cosmos is whirling and expanding and singing. So I think fundamentally, yeah. Maybe it's too abstract, but for me, it's very concrete. Part of my practice is to dance and improvise music all the time. So yeah, that I would hope that that's part of a universal religion.
I love it. Me too. I would hope so too. Okay, Robbie, we're running out of time. Is there anything that you'd like to share before we close out?
Fundamentally, kudos to you for doing this, for all the reasons that you're doing it. Blessings to you and everyone who listens. Like, in your heart, if anything's going wrong, if anything's going really right, you're not alone.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences today, Robbie. It's really been a pleasure to have you on Baoism Unveiled. This concludes another episode of Baoism Unveiled. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And remember, whether you're a Baoist or whether you're simply curious about the diverse world of spirituality that exists in our world, The journey continues. Until next time, embrace the wisdom, find your rocks, and live in harmony. Be happy.